It's actually very difficult to be in the weeds and optimizing process and looking at how you solve a problem and also having a strategic hat. I feel like credibility is very important to establish. And the best way to do that is by knowing your product and knowing your customer. We need to take into account and think about, is that our customers saying really we should use more AI? We know the environmental cost that AI has. We know how much water it uses.
Welcome to the Product House, where friends nerd out about the product. So this is another very special episode for Product House PM Spotlight. The three words that I can't pronounce it great, but let's try. It's the roles, and the reflections. A journey into a real world of the product management. We've been talking about what's the value of the title and the true stories behind it as well.
So each episode, we're sitting down with different product managers from strategy through to execution and operations to unpack the role and what it really looks like behind the title. So just a disclaimer before we get into it, the views on this podcast are our own and not related to our employers. Name and events may be anonymized to protect privacy.
So today we have a very special guest again, which is actually old colleagues of mine who was once accused of thinking too much about the customer.
Sure. Sorry.
But also probably own the title of the Queen of the Customer Feedback, Dipa Rao here.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So Dipa is a senior product manager at CultureAmp with a rich career that spans consulting, digital transformation, and over a decade of software delivery. She's known for her laser focus in creating real customer value, not just talking about it, but building the teams, the culture, and roadmaps that deliver it. Outside of your CV, you're also a writer, performer. She's a fierce advocate for gender and social justice, and she was a finalist for the Our Watch Journalism Award for reporting on violence against women, and co-produced Gita, I hope I've pronounced that right, a documentary that won the Social Justice Film Award at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival as well. Please welcome Dipa Rao.
Yay!
Thank you.
Oh my God, Dipa, you have there's so much things I didn't know about you. So tell me a bit more about this documentary stuff.
I got involved with that now, I think 10 years ago almost. I was doing a bit of writing on family violence, so I was covering a whole bunch of events around that. And a friend of mine introduced me to a friend of hers, saying, Emma is this director and she's doing a documentary on family violence that's set in India. So I had a chat to her. One thing led to another. I started off just volunteering, and I said, I'll do writing for you, like media releases, profiles, things like that. And then we did a bit of fundraising, and then before I knew it, I was working kind of on the project as a co-producer. That's like the official title I got for the documentary. So we did a whole bunch of fundraising events to like get money. I cooked, I think, a meal when we were trying to raise money for someone who won like a $500 voucher for Indian food. I did a show where we sang and we did poetry to raise money, or a whole bunch of things. We finally did get money from Screen Australia and Film Vic and for post-production. And the film screened at MIF from memory, I think 2022.
Wow,
I mean,
that's actually not too far away.
Yeah, it was about, we're still recovering from like COVID, getting in and out of lockdown. So it's a rough time for a film premiere.
Would have.
But then, we won at Santa Barbara and a whole bunch of other festivals, actually. The film did very well on the international circuit. Yeah, so then I kind of retired from the project. I'd been working on it, I think, at the time for about 7 years.
7 years?
Wow.
Yeah, 7 years. Yeah, Emma had already started working on it before I joined, and she'd done a couple of trips to India and then a few more after. Once it premiered and was at MIF, I felt like my job was done. It was in a good place. It has a whole like social impact work that's associated with the project. That'll probably continue, but I kind of took a bow and said, okay, it's out. So I'll kind of retire gracefully at this point.
Oh my God, that is very exciting. Not every single product manager you speak to have this experience.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see a film up close. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Kiet has any follow-up question around that. I just can't wait to actually play a little bit rapid fire with Dipa, so we can go a little bit deeper about other aspects of her life as well. Well, Okay, in that case, I think all the audience probably here at this point already know how this works. Essentially, we have 5 AI-generated questions. We're just going to go through them one by one and answer in a very quick way. So the first question is, how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Energetic, driven, and empathetic.
Great. This is actually the Dipa I know. So definitely. Kiet, what about you?
Aloof, creative, and spontaneous.
Love it. Not sure about the aloof part. We can talk a bit more outside the
I'm definitely not
Perfect.
grounded. So whatever the opposite of grounded.
Yeah. Me, I don't know. I don't have any adjective coming to my head when I read that. I have some verbs. So trying, learning, and creating. So
Nice.
that's me.
Nice.
Okay. So if you could have anyone in the world to have a lunch with, either real or fictional, who would it be?
It's a hard one. David Attenborough.
That'd be very cool.
I think that'd be very cool to talk to him about his whole experience. Like, I remember watching a clip of him initially starting his career, like capturing wildlife for zoos and like the whole arc. So he went from there to being like this amazing conservationist. I've watched so many of his videos. He has so much experience, knowledge. I think it would be fascinating to talk to him.
You could probably
man.
sit down and listen to David Attenborough talk about breakfast, and it'd still be amazing, right? So,
Fascinating. Yeah.
like, I'd love to have dinner with Richard Feynman. He's a famous science educator, but also just a very intelligent man with many aspects. He worked on the Manhattan Project, and one of the key people behind when the Challenger mission, I think it was the one that blew up, he was behind the investigation of it as well. So, like, just man of many talents.
Yeah, okay. I don't know much about the Richard. Maybe after this, can you actually send me a few of the work that actually he do? And then we
Yeah.
can include in the show notes as well. That would be really cool. Funny thing is, the first person coming to my mind is not anyone famous. It's literally my grandma. So
Great.
because I just really wanted to have lunch with her whenever I can, because she's in her 90s and she has dementias, and but sometimes when she in the good day, she just have some amazing stories in the war times, some of the things she did, how to bring up 2 kids in the middle of everything happening, and just amazing. So yeah, I just would love to have more lunch with her.
Great. Because both of us just named 2 white men and you're the exception. So that's awesome.
Okay, so fourth question is, would you rather receive brutally honest feedback or endless praise?
Would if I had to pick between the 2, endless praise.
Yeah.
Then I do not want. If I had to, I don't mind it once in a while, but if you gave me the option of picking between the 2, I reckon I would choose praise, not brutally honest feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably an honest answer. That's good.
I have to go with brutally honest feedback because I know giving feedback is hard. So feedback is a gift.
Yeah. I think actually, you know, I probably would choose with the feedback. The only reason for that is because I'm very insecure. When people only saying the good things about me, I probably will be the person to give me a lot of like criticism. So
Depends on context as well. It depends on who's giving you the feedback. Like if my mother or my partner said, I want to give you brutally honest feedback, sure. Like it doesn't threaten or intimidate me. But like if my manager said that, or someone with a different relationship, someone work related said that, then I think I'd be much more wary.
to be very honest, that I was on the other way. My husband and my mom should only talking about endless praise of me, especially my husband. How dare he could give me any honest feedback?
The funny thing is, I'm actually working on a product.
Oh yes, true. Yes, true. And we're using them as well.
Let's get into it. I'm excited to kind of find out about you, Dipa. Could you tell our audience a little bit about the journey into product for you? Because we find after talking to quite a lot of product managers, everyone just has this unique story.
Yeah. So I started in product, I'd say maybe about 7 years ago. And I was working in delivery at the time. That's where I was working with Charlotte, actually, at a company called Elaborate. And at the time, I was an Agile coach. So I'd done a couple of years in delivery, and then I'd moved on to be an Agile coach. And it just felt like a little bit rinse and repeat. It felt like, you know, you go in with the team, each team has its own unique sort of issues or their own unique challenges they're facing. But in about 6 to 8 months, like you set up a process, you understand what they need, and then the challenge you kind of solve that issue or you get much better at it and then you move on to your next challenge. And it just felt a little bit repetitive at that point, having done it for 3 years. And looking around, I found that the people who were actually telling delivery what to do or were deciding what priorities were for delivery were product people. So then I thought, oh, that'd be really interesting to move from execution on a day-to-day basis to move into a little bit more of what a product should do and how it should work. So that's when I decided to do a bit of reading on product. And then I got like a mentor at the organization who was a product manager. And then I made the leap full time into product. I was very lucky that way, is that we moved to an organization. And then there was an opening on his team. And he said, well, like I was his mentee. And he said, do you want to join me? So I was very, very lucky in terms of getting a break.
So the transition was relatively smooth.
Very small.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
I'm just curious about like what's the biggest from a coaching role to the product role, I guess, skills wise, mindset wise, what are the change?
I think skills wise, time management is probably the biggest change. I think in delivery, I didn't find the need to actively manage time the way I do need to in product, because all of a sudden when you move to product, you're now engaging with a greater variety of people. Engaging with delivery people, you're engaging with like researchers and designers. In delivery, you engage with designers, but like at a higher level of abstraction. You're engaging with go-to-market. You're engaging with people who are in customer support, who are talking to customers. You're engaging with customers themselves much more. You're engaging with a whole bunch of other departments in the organization, because if you're all part of the same larger product, then what you do has an impact on them. What they do has an impact on you, not from a delivery perspective, but like a longer timeline perspective. So I feel like product managers are very, very time poor. And so like you need to be very almost brutal with regards to protecting time where you need to do work, as opposed to just majority of time is spent in context giving or context sharing. And with it's split amongst a greater variety of stakeholders.
Yeah. It's an interesting observation in the ratio of a delivery person versus the ratio of a product manager, right? It's almost as a Venn diagram, what you're responsible and accountable for, it almost completely overlaps, but a product manager, the expectations are kind of so much more
greater. Yes, that's right.
But this is the first time I actually hear people categorize Agile coach as a delivery person as well. So this probably is a rabbit hole because we are not a coaching podcast. But I'm just really curious why you categorize Agile coach as a delivery person. What's that role about?
I mean, I suppose because most of the there is definitely a product component to Agile coaching, but the way that I've seen it mostly in my work life has been that majority of that time is spent trying to coach the people actually producing code and the people managing the people producing code to be able to be more efficient, more sustainable, more repeatable, more predictable, ensure that there's quality. It's not really focused on, are you solving the right problem? It's focused on, you know what the problem is to solve. How can you get from knowing what the problem is to solving the problem as predictably and as repeatably as possible? So that's why, how would you classify an Agile coach?
Well, I think that's a big question. To be honest, I would be interested to hear Kiet's like experience as well.
That's
Because
Apple.
I feel like it's just because there's so many different level of Agile coach, and then there's team level, there's an organization level. I think at team level, as like Scrum Master kind of coaching, I think definitely a bit more delivery focused. Exactly what you say.
Yeah,
I have seen like other type of Agile coach. They're actually a bit more system focused.
I think the accountable and responsible part of an Agile coach is ways of working, scaling, and how the process of creating product rather than creating the product itself. So it's a lot more akin to people who do product operations, right? They're trying to solve the problems of how do we scale this product organization, whereas a product manager's trying to solve for how do we sell the product.
And why behind it? I actually like the way how you describe it. Almost like coaching is probably focus a bit more about how a process side of thing, but PM kind of need to, as to go back to your points, I think, but your kind of scope is much bigger. You need to worry about why, what, and how as well.
and like to clarify, I was working at like a team level across multiple teams, but I do know there's a whole bunch of coaching that you do at exec level, right? It's like how should you set up your product organization? I was working at more delivery level.
Yeah. So curious on the flip side to that, and I think We ask different people and they have different responses around how they describe product manager as a role. What's your definition of product manager?
I would see a product manager as a person who is responsible for understanding what a customer needs from their product, or if they don't have a product yet, what gap there exists in customers using a particular product or service, and then finding a good fit between commercial viability and meeting that customer's need. So you might have something that where there's a gap, but it just doesn't make sense for you as a business to fill that gap for a variety of reasons. So I think it's balancing those two things, which is probably the most, which I would say is squarely where a product manager sits. There's also a third angle, which is like feasibility. Like, is it actually possible to solve this problem?
Yeah.
But I
it's a
kind of
whole part.
include that. I include that in commercial viability as well. You've got to take into account how much it's going to cost to produce this and how much benefit you're going to get from serving this market and whether you can do that repeatedly. So I would say,
balance.
yes, very,
balancing
very,
it, yeah.
very hard balance. So I'd say fundamentally a product manager does. But I think the other thing is also the ability to be able to deal with multiple things at one time, is that you don't want to get fixated on what is one problem or one thing that you want to solve at any given time. I think there's multiple avenues that a product manager needs to be able to explore, because then you become quite narrow in terms of in terms of what value you want to add.
So what would you say, like in your transition, which one is the kind of hardest skills to pick up as a non-product people to transition into a product management role?
I'd say two things. I was a BA before I was a delivery manager, a delivery lead, or a scrum master, or an IM. The focus of a BA is constantly understand what the customer needs, right? Like one-on-one BA training. So I feel like for me, the transition from being a BA to then a product manager wasn't difficult at all. I didn't struggle with that. What I did, I think, struggle with was time. It's how do you manage your time? As a delivery person, my mantra used to be like 50% of my job is to be available for the team. Be on the floor. Back then when we used to work on a floor, be available, because things will happen, blockers will come up, work will be incomplete for some for some reason, something will have a bug and you'll have to move it back, or something's taking too long, work out why it's taking too long, there's some tech issue that's popped up. 50% of the job is being there, being present and being there and being available to solve issues as they come up. So as a product person, that's not the case. You have to be available for the team to answer questions, but you also have a whole bunch of other things to kind of work out in terms of this context piece, right? So I think time management is probably one of the hard things. The second thing was for me to move away from delivery. I think if you've worked in delivery for so long, you want to be close to the details. You want to be close to the how. You're looking at optimizing the process. And it's actually very difficult to be in the weeds and optimizing process and looking at how you solve a problem and also having a strategic hat. Maybe people who are like prodigious or very, very talented can traverse that landscape from like the detail all the way to high, very, very high level. But I feel like if I'm too involved in the weeds, then it's very difficult to have perspective on 5 years from now. If you're looking at some status and how the status needs to be managed and needs to transition from this to that, and you're spending time talking and thinking about that, then it's very difficult to take that hat off and put another hat which says, oh, what are the big picture problems that we want to be solving in 5 years? Or what is this product going to look in 5 years? I find it very difficult to do both those things. So my first manager, who was my product mentor, gave me excellent advice. And he said, stop attending team meetings. Like stop attending stand-up, stop attending planning. Refinement. We had a BA when I was working at this organization, a BAIM. So as long as the BAIM is clear about what priorities are, and as long as the designer knows I'm working with the designer and the IM separately to shape the backlog, and they understand where my head's at and what the priorities are, they should be able to take that work and then break it down. Don't be involved in that, because you can't do those both things at the same time.
This sounds really, really hard thing to do, especially for people who come from kind of delivery background, who always used to be in the weed.
Yeah.
And now you basically need to learn about the trust other people to run the process for you and to be able to grow. Sounds like a very hard process.
Yeah, so I think I found it, I think it's like a year and a half into it when I said, okay, I'm going to stop attending team meetings regularly. So I can focus on other things. Otherwise, you just don't have enough time in the day. You've got 8 hours a day. And if you're attending every retro, every sprint planning, every refinement session, and every stand-up, then how much time do you have to do other stuff?
Yeah, that's like 50% of your time is
Exactly.
just gone as well.
It's a really interesting trade-off, and completely agree with everything you've mentioned there. How do you then get confidence in that you have a sense of the pulse of the team?
I think it depends on the maturity of the team and the maturity of the process that they have. And so I find with some teams, you can just go, I'm not attending these anymore. Let me know if I have questions. Make sure that you're doing all the other bits to make sure that the work is flowing through well. But it's harder to do with a team that is not as mature. If the processes are not quite there, they're not as repeatable. The practice is such that they have a lot of, not questions. I think questions is like a symptom of a deeper problem. If they don't have the skills needed to work independently and autonomously and take something and then break it down, then I think you'll have to be much more present. And I find that there's a significant difference in organizations, from my experience, who have BAs and who don't have BAs. And I feel like BAs are like a bit of a like in the new world. No, we don't want to have BAs. We have engineers. They'll break the work down. If it's a small product, I think that is viable. But my experience with a biggish product is that you need someone to dedicatedly do that work. Like when you have integrations to other products, when you're looking at data flows, when you're looking at the details of how this should be, what fields you should have somewhere, what statuses they should go through, it is not as efficient for the engineering team to come together and do that because there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people versus like maybe a BA who does that work. And this might be a bit of a controversial opinion.
I have a question because I also work in the environment who used to have BA, and also I even work in the environment. There's a PM, there's a PO, and there's a BA.
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm interested. One of the feedback sometimes I get from the BA is people get confused about their role and the other product manager and product owner's role as well. So I'm interested to hear about what do you think about the difference between all these roles in your experience, and what's the day-to-day handover look like interaction look like between you and the business analyst in the as well.
Yeah. So I've also worked in similar environments where you have all three, like you have BA, PO, and PM.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's easier to take a much more strategic lens when you have a BA or when you have a BA and PO, because then you can leave the day-to-day running of that to the PO. Like if someone's like, oh, how many views does this particular page have or this particular function have? Right now, as a PM in my organization, we don't have BAs or POs. That is something for me to do. So those kind of everyday things for us to make a decision about, should we implement this feature like this or like that? How refined should the interface be based on how often someone's using it? In a different environment, like the PO would probably take care of a bit of that, the POBA. But in this environment, as a product manager, I have to look at that request and that level of detail, while also looking at, okay, when does this customer renew? What are they worth? And what does my roadmap look like for the next 3 years? And I find it very difficult to balance those two things just in terms of time. And I think the other problem you have sometimes is also size of team. When you have a smaller team, you have 4 months to feed. If you have 4 engineers, you have 4 months to feed. The amount of refinement you need to do to keep 4 people busy is okay. But when you have 8 engineers, then I think it's very difficult to have one product person doing enough work to keep a team of eight fed and then do all the other work that you need to do. Stakeholder management, context sharing, looking at your prioritization, looking at what discovery you want to do in the next 3, 6, 9 months. So I think it's a combination of like sort of team dynamics and size. I find it much easier to be able to look at a more strategic level when you have someone doing the breaking down and the refinement and converting like a product idea to code. So does that answer your question?
It does. It does. It definitely answer the first part of the questions about the complexity, based on complexity and teams. But then when you do have the BA in your team, what's the actual handover look like? Like how do you guys work together day to day?
I think it boils down to basically understanding what the next priority is that's coming up, and having enough time to then break that down before the team has to actually start working on it. So when I did have a BAIM, I would basically spend some time with them looking through the prioritized backlog so they understand what's coming up next.
Okay, I have a very specific question is, do you believe BA should report to product managers? Because the reason why I'm asked that question is because I also work in the environment, especially those one who has PM, PO, and BA one. Generally, they will have the PO and BA reporting to some sort of delivery people in the IT, and they will have product manager reporting to some sort of business GMs in the business. So there was a big kind of a controversy about, we shouldn't have BA and PO reporting to PM. So I'm just curious about, but then I also hear another story around that's actually a natural career path for BA to actually moving up to become a product manager. If they don't get the exposure of what product manager do day to day, how do they get there? So I'm interested to hear about your opinions around this.
I don't have any strong opinions about it, to be honest. I would think that a PM and a PO just would work together better, because I see a PO role as just having a different time frame compared to a PM in an organization where there's both, right? So I worked in a large logistics company where you had a PO and a PM, and my lens was much more like 9 to 12 months, and the PO's lens, or 6 to 12 months, the PO's lens was very much 3 months. What are we doing for this sprint, next sprint? What does this quarter look like? So I think, like, in terms of learning, there's a lot of opportunity for PO and PM to work together. I don't know if that should necessarily be a reporting relationship.
Okay.
It might be good to have that. I think a BA would be probably better fit to report to delivery, because the BA is much more delivery focused. Also, the BA works much more intimately with the team, right?
If I kind of play back what I've heard is, there's a job to be done in the team, right? Which is, someone needs to define the strategy. Someone needs to break down that strategy into executionable bits, right? And really, if those jobs are done, it doesn't matter who actually does it. And so I do find it ironic that there are some very strong opinions about the role of business analysts, right? And
Yes.
got some
Yes.
Silicon Valley kind of startup archetypes. They're like, no, we have PMs working directly with engineers. I think there's an interesting context there, because some of these organizations are, they're hiring engineers. Not only are they the brightest kids coming out of university, a lot of them also have a kind of entrepreneurial kind of streak as well. So they're kind of getting their hands dirty. There's an ageism piece in there as well, because they're all very young. They have all the time in the world. This work is 100% of their world,
Life.
right? So these engineers can do two jobs of BAing and coding and whatever it is. And so that's a team dynamic and an organization dynamic that's very different from larger, more established organizations where you want very defined roles, right? So, and then obviously Charlotte's question around
Reporting
lines, I think that's just adding complexity to an already complex kind of environment, right?
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is just sometimes I'm on the same boat as Dipa. I don't have strong opinions about who reporting to what, but it just always seems like come up in almost every digital transformation project around how do we categorize these three roles, and then how do we actually setting up a reporting line, a coaching line that make sure these roles success.
I feel like a good measure is, can this person learn about the craft from the person they report to? I feel like that's a good way. So can the BA learn from the delivery lead? Possibly.
I recently just come from the Marty Kagan's events, right? And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
as we all know, he has very strong opinions around product manager and product owner. Even in the event specifically, he kind of emphasized multiple times that he doesn't believe the role of PO / kind of BA type of role will exist in the future. And then also when he being asked very similar type of question about then, what would you think about the future kind of most efficient team look like? He's specifically talking about he would believe it's going to be a PMs and engineer, some sort of tech lead type of AI. He said whatever the role is he's going to call, it can be maybe AI engineer and tech lead, and it will be a PM type of role. People thinking a bit more strategically, kind of a instead of trio, that's kind of a dynamic. So and then he provide multiple warning around that. The people in the role of the PO or BA title should really considering around to moving to become the true a PM, which is a PM working in the empower team environments as well. So that's why it caused a lot of nervous, of course, in the group over there around then as a PO and BA with this title. How do I actually learn to become the PM. We can't magically become the PM. And then basically that's when he talking about the points around, well, generally that's important about the product leaderships. And then because the best source for you to learn as a junior product people, surprising or not surprising, is actually through who you work with, likely your manager or the people in your team. So if you don't expose yourself into that environment, it's unlikely for you to learn. And that's why probably kind of like one argument for why sometimes if you are in the PO and BA environment, maybe there's a benefit for you to reporting to a true kind of product people, essentially, in the organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very happy to move on for this topic as well, because I feel like it is going quite deep around that.
Yeah, I must say, I do very much agree with Marty's kind of philosophy around the fact that a product manager also needs to coach and be passing on and coaching in the sense of teaching the next generation.
100%. Well, is that a good segue to actually ask Dipa to get some career advice to some of the PM friends at the moment in the market? So what would you reckon is the most important skills for like a product professionals to get in their career at the moment?
I think the basics, I think being able to be credible as a product manager is very, very important. Product people tend to have to convince people that the problem is worth solving, tend to have to talk to a whole bunch of stakeholders in the organization about their product. So I feel like credibility is very important to establish. And the best way to do that is by knowing your product and knowing your customer. So know the numbers, know them off the top of your head. You don't have to know all the numbers, 3 numbers. Usage.
How do I know this number? Like if I'm a junior PM, I'm coming in, how do I learn that?
So set up your dashboards, get help from an analytics person to set up the key dashboards. I have like time blocked out in my calendar for when I look at dashboards. So it's not just something that, I look at when I feel like I have a slot a few times a week to look at it and identify what the important numbers are. Is it usage? Is it how often people are using your product? How many people are using it? Is it which customers are using it in a B2B environment? Like who's using your product can be very, very important as opposed to just the number of users you have. Who's using your product? What do they say about your product? How much money is coming in from them for your product? Things like that. And the third is like a bit qualitative, like have some verbatims ready. Look at customer reviews, look at customer feedback, look at NPS. What are people saying about your product to help build that narrative? Like I said, I work at Culture Amp, and my favorite quote at the moment is someone giving us feedback about a product being unintuitive. And then they say, not to mention this bizarre purple that has been permanently seared into my brain because our branding is all purple. So that's very useful to bring up in a conversation or put in a slide deck or a presentation.
Yeah.
So I'd say make a habit of looking at your dashboards regularly, establish what's important and look at them regularly so you know the numbers off the top of your head. You don't have to be like a mathematical savant or know 3 numbers, right? And the second thing is keep a list of interesting customer verbatim quotes from customers, from NPS, good ones, bad ones, and you can pull them out in a presentation, put them in a slide pack as quotes. Those kind of things. Those 2 things will help build credibility for you as a product person.
How do you get those customer kind of a quote and stuff? Do you kind of have a regular session to meet with them, talking to them and recording them?
I try because I love customer feedback. That's my thing. I get extracts of any quote that you can get from customers, whether it's CSAT results, NPS results, usually the feed, either it's fed into Slack or you can get an analyst to do an extract for you. Keep an eye on, try and integrate it into our channels. And I like servicing that for the team as well. So the team has a bit of a pulse as to what customers are saying. And you can have a conversation around that, link it to work that you're doing right now or work coming up in the future. And then I save, I have a ongoing Notion document where when I see something interesting, I save it in there. Who's this customer? When did they say it? What is their size? What tier are they in? Enterprise, non-enterprise, etc., small, medium? When did they say it?
Yeah.
And then when I have to pull that up to justify a feature or do a business case, then I go, these are 3 customers. This is the value. This is what they said about a product. And they said the color purple is seared into their brain permanently.
Love it.
I have a running list that helps me with those kind of conversations and presentations. Because what do product managers do most of the time? Make slide packs, right? So you want to make sure that you're not sourcing the content at the time you need it, that you just have it and you just access it.
That's another important skill, career advice for the PM, creating great like slide deck as well.
Visual storytelling, right? Visual storytelling. The passion that Deepa has in making sure the voice of the customer comes to the surface is really, really apparent, right? And hard to underestimate how having the right quote at the right time really empowers you to kind of get your way, communicating what you need.
Can I actually take Deepa on one thing, because you're talking about feedback, and I wanted to take back to the rapid fire question before, because I just remember you have one story you were going to tell us is regarding to changing the complete product directions after customer feedback and kind of directions.
Yeah, that is, how do I generalize this or put it in a way that is easily understandable? So I was working on this product, which basically was like different types of feedback. And it was difficult for people to understand because there's so many types. Each of them had to be configured differently. Each of them had to be, they had its own like different idiosyncrasies and quirks. And my initial thought for this, based on research and customer feedback, was to standardize it and say, each feature, each of these types of feedback will not necessarily have different features. It'll be kind of the same. You just invoke it at different times, and who can invoke it kind of changes. The more that I worked with the product and the more it went through its like life cycle from being just an idea to being implemented, I realized that no, there were some things that needed to be different about each different type, and that they served a specific purpose, and you couldn't quite generalize the way you initially generalized. So I'd say that was a very recent example from like how I changed my thinking from saying this should just be this consistent, simple, easy, everything's the same kind of product to going, no, it has its own different, it serves a different purpose, slightly different ways. And that warrants having a different kind of, not experience, but having different depth of features for each different product.
You kind of redefined its unique value propositions almost. You find its edge.
Yeah.
Put down on it.
Yeah, I found that sort of value proposition kind of emerged as we worked through the detail of what each one should do. It wasn't clear when you're looking at the whole thing as at a very high level, but once you work through the detail, then you go, okay, no, we've got to change some of this. Our domain model might need to change a little bit to accommodate these changes. But the other sort of change of mind I had was, and this is not necessarily related to a particular product, but more an environment. Since I'm very big on customer feedback, I worked in a consumer environment for a fair while, and now I'm working in B2B. And in consumer environments, you have no dearth of feedback. You have people, I worked in energy, I worked in logistics. People are very engaged with energy a lot because it's quite expensive, and then usage has a huge impact on your bill, and you're paying money for it. So very, very engaged customers. The other organization I worked at was logistics, so it was post, and people are very passionate about parcels, right? You buy something, you want to know when is it coming, what does it have? You have 3 parcels, you're like, which one's which? Where is it? Is it on its way? So 2 very engaged customer bases. And I expected the same kind of engagement from B2B. And so a lot of my focus was initially was to get feedback from customers direct, and it doesn't work the same way. So that was learning for me, is to say you have a very different user base. You have people spending their own money, engaged for very personal reasons in energy and in utilities like energy and logistics. And you have a very different user base when you're working in B2B. People are going to work with your product as part of their work, not as part of their life. So I had to change my strategy in terms of how much feedback I could expect from people, from users with regards to the product, and who I rely on for feedback.
So you reckon it's much less feedback and engagement from the B2B world compared
Definitely.
to B2C?
Yeah. Because people are trying to do it during a set work day, right? And they're working with products that they don't use because they chose to use them. They're working with it because the company has decided, for whatever reason, that this is a product that's suitable for the organization. So I think you take out a little bit of personal choice and agency from that as well. While if you're an electricity company, you're like, well, I don't like the way you treat me, I'm going to move from one to the other. So there's a different level of engagement. So now I rely much more on research for customer feedback as opposed to putting a feature out and saying, tell me what you think about it. Do you like this feature? Don't like this feature. You don't get that kind of engagement. And also talking to people who are proxy.
Sorry, I wanted to double click on that to ask you what the dynamic is between the person who's making the purchasing decision and the person who chooses to continue to pay for that versus
Yeah.
the end user as well? Like how do
Yeah.
you kind of balance those opposing needs?
Three very different personas. I think the thing that I have found in B2B, and this is like based on my personal experience, I'm sure other organizations are different, is that there's much more focus on that buyer persona and the decision maker persona than the user persona.
Yeah.
So, like, why does SAP have the usability it has? Like, it's a complex product, yes, but it's not necessarily catering for end users as much. It's catering for having feature breadth and feature depth for people who are making the buyer decision. Slack is a very different example, but Slack is also, I think, different because of the way it grew. It grew by appealing itself to end users, and then they would influence the decision for the organization to adopt it. It went bottom up versus top down. It's quite difficult to make a case for improving just usability in a B2B environment than it is a B2C environment, because the people who are making the purchase decision in B2C are the people who are using your product, while it's very different in B2B. But I think like you don't, when you do presentations for, we should improve our usability because our XYZ competitor has better usability. That's not the best way to compare. People who are using Netflix are also using your software. People who are using iPhones are also using your software. So I think it's more relevant to do a comparison as to how does your software compare with other software people are using from an end user perspective, and then make sure that you're accommodating multiple personas when you're building your backlog, which is hard to do if there's a lot of pressure. It's hard to do if there's a lot of visibility, because then you can't work on usability improvements if there's a deadline that you have to meet for increasing feature breadth or product breadth.
Is that means that in most situations, when you prioritize a backlog, in general, you will always prioritize the buyers, like personas needs and feature over the end users feature?
There is a tendency to do that, but I think that's where, again, like that product credibility and making sure that you have customer feedback available plays in. How are you, and I talk in my organization about this all the time, what is your source of customer feedback? Do you only have feedback from buyers because you're only asking buyers for feedback? Are you actually asking end users for their feedback? So I think that you need to also have access to that data and have open up channels where you can actually talk to end users. Because when you talk to end users, they'll say things like, this color is still in my brain. Like a buyer is not going to say that. Like a CPO of some organization is not going to give you feedback like that. That is going to be an end user. So make sure that you have sources of feedback coming in, or when you do research, you don't just index on people making the buying decision. You also talk to people who are end users of your product, because you'll end up with very, very different opinions. And then you'll have to balance that opinion.
Yeah, but it sounds like even when you actually get the end users feedback, it's quite a hard thing to draw that back to the ROI and using that to convince, basically to influence the prioritization decisions as well.
Yeah, it is quite hard to do that. But I think like increasingly, that retention is the biggest thing for B2B, because sales cycles are so long usually, especially when you're working with enterprises. So you don't want to spend 2 years getting a customer on board and then losing them the next year. So I think there is definitely an argument to be made for usability to ensure that that's something that will help you to prevent churn and to increase the CLV, customer lifetime value of a particular customer. It is, in any environment, usability improvements are hard to make a justification for, right? Because you can't draw a clear line between this product is going to be better for me to use, therefore it's going to generate X amount of revenue. That very rarely happens. It's usually usability is a long-term proposition.
Retention is 100%, I think, the biggest leverage there to play, because I have so much like hope about importance about customer, because I in every single situations, I think I mentioned to Kiet a long time ago as well, customer feedback is the hills I'm willing to die on. Basically, it's a battle I will always fight. However, very recently, Oracle, a CEO, become the richest people in the world, and that kind of crushed my confidence regarding to around the how important actually is about the user experience and everything. But I would love to get back to Kiet to asking about the killer questions about the AI, because that's another very interesting space. I would love to hear Deepa's opinions around.
Yeah, and I think we were just generally interested in how AI shapes the way you've worked as a product manager.
I find AI to be super useful when it comes as a writing tool. right? When it's like running a workshop and you have a bunch of things that have come up and you want to synthesize that. When you have to prepare a brief for go-to-marketing and you have 5 different documents that you've had bits and pieces and you want to put that all together to say, what is the value of this product? Or what are the main improvements you're delivering? Or how do you pitch this to end users or buyers? I feel it's less useful when it comes to analysis because it doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. So I'll give you an example. The other day I was doing a presentation for a company who are a customer of ours, a large consulting firm, and I wanted to know a whole bunch of detail about these people. I would usually do that by going to a Salesforce, looking up their revenue, looking up how many seats they had, how often they use it, and then I would talk to the coach about how they set up their product internally to understand how they do that. And because we're a performance product, it's very important to know when this customer runs their performance cycle. They run once a year, they run twice a year. I was like, oh, let me get AI to do it. So I quickly made an agent, and I asked it all these questions about this organization, and it got 2 of the areas right, but it got the product that the company uses wrong. So I wanted to know, what is their usage of our product? Do they use the entire product suite? Do they use particular modules? And it got that wrong. I had to run that information by the coach who works with the customer regularly to say, is this correct? And she was like, no, it's not. So I feel like because just scoring a whole bunch of Slack conversations, your internal documentation, it's just doing a summary. I don't know how the internals of it work, but it can return information that is just not true. So I feel like you still have to do a reasonable amount of double checking to make sure that it is accurate. I found it works very well with prototyping though. I was trying to solve this problem with how a customer goes through these multiple flows, and I couldn't find a coherent way to put them all together because there's multiple complex things that you had to do. So I used Claude and said, this is who you are. You're a designer. You work for XYZ. This is your customer base. And this is the problem you have to solve. So build me an interface that does this, and then iterate on that. Or build me 4, and then do the prompt again with sort of a slightly different instruction so that it builds you a different interface, and then put those 4 together. And it was very useful for me to walk my team through what I think this experience should look like. So I feel like that's quite interesting, even if it just helps you expand what you think the design should be. So I'd imagine that'd be very, very useful for designers as well. There is a lot of hype around AI. I think organizations that are mandating that you should use it. And we look at customer feedback. The other thing I feel like we need to take into account and think about is that our customers saying, really, we should use more AI. We know the environmental cost that AI has. We know how much water it uses.
Yeah.
Is that's not something that we're taking into account. We're just treating that as just being something that can run endlessly and not have any impact. It does have an impact. And yet organizations are so keen to get on board. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, right? What I find is that because other organizations are giving customers this value, when customers are assessing your product, they're like, do you have this value? It's just another feature. And so the pressure on organizations is to provide that value, to be able to be competitive. And that then just builds that hype. So it's a hard one.
I have a follow-up question for both of you, actually, because I have been leaving corporate for a while, so I actually don't know what's happening there. But when Dipa mentioned that, it seems like organizations started to mandating some of the use of AI. I'm actually really interested in what does it actually feel like in the day-to-day, and what kind of software they, I guess, recommend, especially the product team to use, and what is allowed, what is not allowed.
So we have a variety of AI tools that we can use. Trump has been very good at trying to make sure that people have time to learn, and they're doing a whole bunch of sessions to get you familiar with AI. So we use Gemini, we use Claude Code.
Wait, you can using everything. So they don't mandate you for a particular AI tool. You actually can do using a set of them.
Yes, they've made them available to us. We don't have any mandates. Luckily, there is encouragement to use it. I've heard of other organizations that do have mandates.
Yeah.
So I use regularly. I'm not set myself on Claude Code just yet. I'm going to do that, but I use Gemini and I use Glee. Yeah, and now Miro has a whole bunch of AI capabilities built into Miro, which is pretty freaking cool, actually. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically, those are the tools they provide specific kind of to product team only, or it's literally for everyone in the organization?
It's for everyone.
That's actually
for everyone.
awesome.
I could probably just talk to it in a general sense. I think for organizations that have invested in their own internal tools, and typically what they would do is have secure standalone instances of the popular models, Claude, OpenAI type models. So it is, you follow the data protocols that you're allowed to work within and the type of information you're allowed to upload. But within those guardrails, it's very handy to just to do stuff. But then if it's a use case where you can, like, you're synthesizing publicly available information, whatever kind of tool you're most comfortable with using, right? And 9 times out of 10, for me personally, if I'm kind of doing work on the side, that's synthesizing publicly available information, like ChatGPT does a great job, as an example. Or if I've got a product idea, I'm trying to, visualize it, then Claude or increasingly Gemini is for anything visual, Gemini's been amazing tool. Like just converting my kids' photos into a cartoon.
Storybook. Yeah, they have a storybook feature in the Gemini these days. That was actually really cool. Okay, that's actually really cool to hear. Like it seems like a organization now, they actually encourage people to using AI, and also they provide a little bit guide rail, but it sounds like also provide quite a little bit kind of freedom for product people to explore different tools as well. That's actually really cool to hear.
Yeah. I've heard from engineers that when they use AI for coding, they kind of go into like a bit of a wormhole where you're trying to optimize for some particular thing, and that takes you down like this whole path. And before you know it, you spend 2 days trying to do this, and then you go,
yes,
just gonna quit and I'm just gonna code this manually. So I think there's some research also that shows that people fear losing their skills, and people do lose some of their skills after using AI intensely. I think there's a balance there to be had. But I do feel like this is a bit of a hype kind of cycle. Remember when crypto came out? Like when crypto was a big thing, and it's going to revolutionize the way we did business and trade. I feel like there's a bit of that with AI, and in a few years it might settle down a bit.
Yeah.
There's also a very big unintended consequence I find as well, because in order to be knowledgeable enough to ask the AI the right questions, you need a certain level of experience. Some of the tasks that it's replacing are typically what you traditionally would get a junior to do, right? And so it's almost removing the learning experience pathway for a lot of new people going into industry to actually develop the skills to ask the right questions, right? So like as a middle to senior, it's supercharge your productivity.
Yeah.
But it comes at a cost. Yeah, it comes at a cost. Environmental cost as well.
Yeah, well, then probably that's a good segue for my next questions regarding to these, because at the moment I just have so many AI hypes out there. Literally every single day in my newsletter. Before I used to have a product management newsletter. I used to have engineering post newsletter. Now everything, when I open my Google Map, it's just AI newsletter. It's just so much noise out there. Everything, basically everyone trying to teach you something about AI. So like, what's your go-to method to, I guess, keeping up with all these new trends, but while keeping calm as well?
Look, I don't make a big effort to keep up with new trends, to be honest. It is a part of what I do. I listen to there's an awesome AI skeptic called Nikhil Suresh, who's actually Melbourne based. He's got a podcast, and I love it because it's hilarious. And I think it's one of his articles went viral. I think the article is like, "I will pile drive you if you talk about AI again." And so he's an engineer, and he talks about like all the issues that when execs talk about AI revolutionizing business and changing things. Then he's like,
yeah,
these are the limitations. I'm an engineer. I work with this stuff, and it's not going to do what you think it's going to do.
Can you actually send me the link afterwards? Yeah. I would love to see that.
I will. So he's got a podcast. I've looked him up. He's also a guest on a whole bunch of other podcasts. So I follow him quite
intensely.
Not intensely, but like quite regularly, because he gives you a different perspective. He doesn't give you the same perspective as everyone else.
Yeah.
I think for me, I learn by doing. I don't learn necessarily by reading.
Yeah.
So I try and experiment with it as much as possible, and luckily I have access to it. So it's a bit easier. I like using like real world scenarios of something I'm trying to do to see if it can help me do it a bit faster. I like following, your Marty Kagan's The World, but John Cutler.
Oh yes! Oh my God, we have so many John Cutler fans on this
podcast.
Yes.
He just talks about real world things.
Yeah.
and he talks about things in such an accessible way without unnecessary jargon, without unnecessary lingo, and without also being pedantic about frameworks or pedantic about doing things in a particular way. So I find them very, very accessible. But otherwise, I'll be honest, it's a challenge with time to be able to try and keep up with what people send with newsletters that I get.
I'm just curious about any other thing that interesting things that people are learning at the moment, because everyone I spoke to, everyone is telling me they're just learning AI.
I don't think so. I think AI has just taken up all of this oxygen, and that's all we're talking about at the moment. No, I can't think of anything that's happened in the world of tech of recent that's generated any amount of interest compared to what we see with AI. Just it's everywhere at this moment. And like the interesting thing for me about AI also is that what is the problem that AI is solving? What is it trying to do?
Efficiency.
So it's trying to make companies more efficient at what they're doing. So it's trying to make people more money. It's not solving any of the basic problems that we have with the world right now. It's not solving poverty. It's not solving climate change. It's not solving war. But it's helping a bunch of companies make money more efficiently than they used to make money. That's the problem we have. The problem we have is companies making too much money, and AI is just helping them do that better. So I don't think it actually, going back to like customer feedback, is it actually solving a problem for customers and end users? Maybe in some instances, yes, it's making repetitive things easier to do, or things that don't require much complexity easier to do, but is it actually solving a real problem? Was there a need for AI?
The hard part is splitting the difference between the hype and the real world impact that some use cases for AI have been very, very impactful, right? Like in science, as an example, using AI models, they've managed to define the structure of proteins. In the last year, I think they did what they couldn't do in the last 20 years, as an example. But like, you don't hear about that because, like, Deepa, to your point, the whole hype and the commercialization of it kind of takes up all the oxygen away from actually some of these more tangible real world benefits and use cases, right?
I was saying one of the ways that AI has absolutely made my life easier is we use Glean internally, and we have this constant chatter really amongst our customer service team and us who are like, how does this product work? What is the visibility like? If we do this, then what happens? Or this customer, this particular setup, and they need to do XYZ. Do you support this feature? And that's usually you having to either remember how it works, or if it's a unique scenario, then you have to test it, and then it just takes up a lot of time. But now we have Glean running. And Glean
What's
is
it
connected.
called? Glean?
It's called Glean, Glean, Glean. And it's connected to Slack, it's connected to Confluence, it's connected to GitHub, it's connected to a whole bunch of sources. And now Glean just answers that question for you. So I don't have to spend time thinking about it, testing it, double checking that I'm right. Glean answers it for you because that question has been asked at some point in the past with a different product manager or somewhere else. And it puts that together and answers it. It gets it wrong sometimes, don't get me wrong, but it's made a significant difference for me because I don't have to answer every question. 8 out of 10, it gets it right. Some of the things are super unique and maybe that question has never been asked before. You still have to do some work then. But otherwise, it's just that noise of this constant question back and forth it's gone down significantly. So that's been really, really good.
Yeah.
Nice. Keen to, I guess, take us away from the AI conversation a little bit now and go back to product in general. One of the key things we wanted to explore with the podcast was people's views around, where they've come from, what does the real world look like, but kind of projecting forward. What are some of the things you see with the role of product management evolve over the next couple of years?
I feel like it'll become broader. I feel like it will become wider to encompass some of design and become wider to encompass some of delivery. And I don't know if I don't think it is a good idea, but I feel like organizations increasingly look at product managers as being this like multi-tooled people, right? And I feel like they will stretch that role to encompass more than it does right now. I don't think it's a good outcome for product. I don't think it's a good outcome for people. I know product people are probably the most stressed. that we have in general. We're very, very conscious about capacity for engineering and very, very conscious about how much engineers can take on, how much ambiguity they can work with. Very, very conscious about their learning and sustainable development, but no one ever says that about product people, I don't think. I don't think anyone's like, oh, we should devote a day for product managers to learn about product stuff, the way engineering has a certain time allocated for learning. So I feel like it's already a stretch role, and I think it's going to become more stretched. That's my prediction for product managers. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
I echo that sentiment. And one thing, I always talk about the contrast of the culture of product management in places like the US and here in Australia, right? And there's a lot more expectation in those in the US, and good and bad in terms of the cultural kind of differences as well. One thing I think is we could borrow a lot more from them is like product managers get paid a lot more in the US versus here. So like you almost don't have to feel sorry for them. You will, but then the same expectations are starting to be had of product managers here in Australia, right? So
yeah.
That's a very interesting directions that you are taking us there. But one thing I was talking about that I did thought about it. Okay, I know Kiet trying hard to take us away from the whole AI things, but then I kind of just come back because I remember I went to one of the events, and then I think someone is head of visual design from Canvas or Atlassian, one of these big company. They were talking about how when they implement AI, what they decide to do is they take a discovery week for the whole company, essentially. And that discovery week, because traditionally most of the organization, they will only provide AI training to the dev because they feel like they are the people who need the tech the most. However, what they do is literally they have the whole company, every single role, regarding what you are. This is the week for you to take your time and take your own space as well. If you decide to do some sort of AI training, you can do training. If you decide to build something, you can build something. If you want, basically you can do everything you wanted in this way, as long as it's related to AI to do it, and regarding what your role it is, which I feel like that's actually quite powerful around that, because I do agree with Dipa. Sometimes as a PM, I also get very jealous around why all the other role, they seem to be able to go to conference, they will be able to do this, they can have a hackathon, they can have an innovation day, and then it seems like it's much less common for us to do that.
I think it's a wrap, isn't it? Thank you, Deepa.
It is. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed that chat. Your authenticity and your frankness kind of comes across through the whole interview, and it was nice to just nerd out. We went through a couple of rabbit holes, and I think we were all three of us kind of better for it. So.